We're going to set this Kohler toilet back into place. I had to remove the toilet to inspect for a leak. To remove the toilet, I took the tank off and dumped it out in the shower. I lifted the toilet up and dumped it out in the shower too. So first what I'm going to do is set the toilet in dry to check it and see if it rocks. Alright, so the toilet's set in dry, there's no wax ring, the flange bolts aren't there, and it rocks pretty badly. So we're going to have to shim this toilet. First thing we do is put a level on it. And we'll put a level in back, because that's where the tank will go. And it matters more if the tank is level than if the seat is level. Most of these toilets don't have a single plane. In other words, the back might be out of the same plane that the front's in. So, putting it down, I know that I'm going to have to shim the front. So I've pulled the toilet back off. Now I've set the wax ring in place, and the two closet bolts are on the side roughly in position. The toilet's been set in place over the wax ring and over the closet bolts. Nothing's been tightened down yet. When I did my test fit with the level, I knew that I wanted to tighten the left side first. So we're going to gradually compress the wax ring. We're going to go left to right, but ultimately tighten the left side down tight. The right side will be up a little bit, and I'll do this with my level in place. So the base for the plastic trim piece was put on, paying attention to which side is up, and then the fender washer, and finally the nut. Now these will be tightened gradually, alternating sides until the left side is where I want it, and until the toilet bowl is level, using the level in back. So I've started tightening the toilet down to the floor, and in just a minute I'm going to put my whole weight on the toilet to try to compress it, but also pay attention to level so that I don't compress it where it's out of level. So this left side has been tightened up just about as much as I feel comfortable. I don't want to over tighten it and risk breaking anything. I'm pretty good in terms of level. And now I'm going to start to shim it. I'm using these plastic shims that you can buy at just about any plumbing supply store or Home Depot or Lowe's. It's just a little wedge. I'm going to set these in pretty much so just for a rough feel right now. And then in a minute I'm going to actually glue them to the floor. I'll take the shim and just sort of see how they fit in. It doesn't really fit in the back, so there won't be any shimming in the back. But here at the front, we're going to start to shim it here. And this package comes with 4 shims. I'll use all 4 of them. Sort of like this. So I see how that is. I'm going to use some adhesive to glue those in, and then I'll use a chisel to pop them off. Here's my adhesive. This is just what I happen to have open. It's a pretty good adhesive for this job. I'm only going to glue one side of the shims. That way the toilet can be taken off again, just as a courtesy to whoever's repairing it in the future. And there'll be a tiny amount of adhesive that goes under the shim. The purpose here is basically just to keep the shim from moving. There's some blue painter's tape put around the base of the toilet just to keep the excess adhesive from getting all over the floor. Here's one of the shims with a tiny amount of adhesive. You see it's just on the tip there. We'll reach down and put it in. There we go. Now I'll come back with a chisel and pop the extra plastic off and then take up the tape. All 4 wedges have been popped off using my chisel. It's kind of a dull chisel. You have to be careful about not going into the floor, but if you have the right motion, it's not a concern. The bolts have been tightened, but not too tight. We'll put the caps on, take off the tape, and then we'll set the tank. I'm going to use a new supply line, a new tank to toilet gasket, and a new compression sleeve as I install the tank. I have the old parts, they look okay, I just don't want there to be any risk of this leaking. So I'll take my tube cutter and cut the old supply line to get the nut off, and then we'll reinstall the tank. So here's why it's important to get the lower section of the rim of the back of the toilet level. These Kohler tanks really don't allow for much adjustment. They have a metal flange and you tighten that down. I don't think you would want to leave one side loose. I think you need to get both sides reasonably tight without risk of breaking the porcelain. If the lower section is level, then the upper section will be level by default, and you end up with a good result. So I've got my rigid supply line. I'm getting an approximate idea of how long it needs to be. I'm going to cut it twice. I'm going to cut it rough once and then at the proper length. But I need to cut the tail off so that I can actually set it in to get an idea what the proper length will be. I've used my spring-form tube bender to get a rough approximation of the bends that are necessary to insert the pipe. We'll set this roughly in position. I'll make a mark at the bottom and cut it to the proper length. It looks like it'll be a good fit. I know I've got a good seat in the valve below, and it's very close to the fill valve at the top. Take this out. Take off the tube bender. And we'll start to assemble the supply line. Now it's important to remember to put all the nuts on here before you set it in place, because once it's in place you can't put any more nuts on it. My assembly before we set it in place. So the upper nut is finger tight. We'll use some channel locks to give it a quarter turn, but I wouldn't tighten it anymore. These are just plastic pieces. The bottom valve is tightened with a wrench. You can get this pretty tight. This is all metal. Alright, the supply is open again. Turn the knob counterclockwise, open the valve completely, and then I close it a half a turn. So the water's back on, the tank is filling. So far it looks good. I don't see any leaks. We'll check the fill level of the tank. That looks good. We'll check it out. We'll flush it a few more times. But really, if you've done what you need to do, there should not be any leaks. That's it. Thanks for watching.